Hey everyone, welcome back to K-Korner, the channel where we dive into the wild world of entitled people and their unbelievable stories. Hope you enjoy it. And without further ado, let's go. A33F unexpectedly gave birth 2 months earlier than my due date. Thankfully, baby and I are doing great, and we've now made it home. As you can imagine, coming that early meant baby needed a rather long stay in the infant spa, neonatal intensive care unit. Now that we're home, and I've been able to process everything, I wanted to share a moment of malicious compliance that helped bring some levity to a really scary experience. One of the most important things for a baby, especially premature babies, is skin-to-skin time. This is where mothers or fathers will be either topless or open their shirts to cuddle their infant. Baby struggled with jaundice, so our skin-to-skin time was very limited at first because of light therapy. We had been moved to a new location in the neonatal intensive care unit, right next to another baby, and across from 2 others. A standard of care in the neonatal intensive care unit is monitoring the baby's breathing, heart rate, and oxygen levels. These monitors look like an old-school tube TV and are approximately 16 inches by 16 inches. They can display babies in other areas as well, if the nurses need. So, I'm new to this little care area, and I'm getting ready to set up the hospital-provided screen so I can get my skin-to-skin time. I realize I may end up blocking the monitor for the baby next to me from the nurse. I ask the nurse if she can still see, or if my setup was blocking anything for her, as I don't want to interfere with the care of another patient. She tells me everything is good, so I settle in for some much-needed snuggles. Not even 10 minutes later, I feel someone in my space and look up to see a woman glaring down at me. Once I've made eye contact, she starts in on me while I'm topless and holding baby, so very vulnerable, about how I'm blocking the nurse from caring for her baby. When I try to explain that I asked before setting things up, she refuses to listen and continues to lecture, getting more aggressive and angry about how I'm causing her baby not to receive appropriate care, and am pushing her out of the care area. After all the emotional stress and frustration of being in the hospital, I finally snapped. I looked at the nurse and told her to take away the screen. The nurse was horrified and started saying, "But your privacy," to which I replied firmly, "It would seem my privacy and modesty don't matter as much as her comfort. Get rid of the screen." This annoyed her even more, as she realized she'd have to spend the next hour staring at my topless self. She became very uncomfortable, especially when the doctors made rounds, and both got flustered, trying to insist I get a new screen. I may have been the rude one, but I was simply done. I stared right back and said, "According to my neighbor here, my privacy doesn't matter, so we all get to be uncomfortable. When I tell you, if looks could kill, I'd be dead. I'm not joking." The doctors didn't want to deal with it, and the nurses who had to deal with it were laughing quite a bit. They then brought the screen back out and tried to show her that they could totally see all her baby's stats on any monitor, so there was no reason for this outburst. I wish I could say this was the last time she freaked out about this. But she pulled this same kind of stunt almost every time I tried to snuggle my baby until her baby was finally discharged a week later. But seeing the look of shock on her face when I just forced everyone to look at my chest is probably going to make me giggle every time I think of it. I was with my difficult husband for 10 years. We had a successful band together and toured all over for years. He asked an artist who had opened up for another famous artist in our genre to put in a good word for us and help us open for him on his next tour. My husband wanted that opportunity very badly, as he thought the artist was incredibly talented. The friend ended up opening for the talented artist, so we didn't get the tour. The artist never knew we tried, and didn't know who we were because our name never got past the friend my husband asked for help. We divorced a few years later, and I started dating again. My husband was a very unpleasant person. He was one of the worst people I've ever met in terms of how he takes advantage of people and mistreats them. One small example is that he pawned my wedding dress, and the 5 heirloom rings from my grandmothers and great-grandmothers that were passed down to me. He did even worse things, but I won't get into that right now for the sake of getting to the point. Anyway, the talented musician came into my town and had been on Bumble, where he matched with me. He didn't know I was part of the band from before. He took me out for a weekend, wined and dined me every day, drove me to the festival where he was performing all weekend, bought me gifts, spent the whole weekend with me, and asked me to go with him on a resort vacation. Yes, I made sure my ex-husband found out about all of that. I told him how amazing the musician was when he performed, how nice he was, what a great weekend we had together, and how he's even greater in person. It was so satisfying. Edit. Okay guys, for those of you who are criticizing me about how I should have left him earlier, and how I'm awful, read on. I wasn't going to get into all this, but it's unfair to criticize me without knowing the backstory. Yes, I'm sure he has his own version of how it all went down, but the facts are the facts in this scenario. I never did anything to harm him physically, financially, emotionally, or reputation-wise, even when he did the worst to me. Here's some context. I grew up Christian, where in my circle it was normal and expected to get married young. I married him at 19 and he was 7 years older. I mention the Christian aspect because I was taught to trust my husband as the authority, and that divorce was bad. Through the years, he was extremely abusive emotionally, financially, verbally, and physically, and it grew worse each year. I stayed because I thought it was the right thing to do. I mentioned the thing about the selling of the heirlooms and dress because I was keeping it light instead of bringing up darker examples. I was very much isolated from my family and any objective reasoning until the end, when I was a shell of myself and couldn't go on anymore, because I was self-harming, severely depressed, and unable to cope with life. After that, I made the brave decision to reach out to my family for support as I got away from him and filed for divorce. He fought me on it all the way just to be cruel. Our daughter died, and he stole all the money from the GoFundMe that was raised in her name, tens of thousands of dollars, closed our joint bank account 2 days after she died, opened a new one in his name with a different bank, and got the person who set up the GoFundMe to link it to his new bank account. He sent me a bank statement with my account showing $0 as a final act of cruelty. The things he did to me over the years are too much to even say. He abused me and my daughter, and I tried everything to keep our marriage together, counseling for myself when he wouldn't go, reading all the marriage books, and doing everything I thought a good wife should do to support and love him, but it didn't make a difference. I could have done a lot to ruin his reputation, but I've always been the bigger person. So for goodness sake, I'm going to proudly have this one. Hello Reddit, I'm back with another long one. This one has been going on for a decade, and I am personally very proud of how it turned out. A little over 10 years ago, when I was a young carpenter, I met a guy who I'll call Chad. Chad was a new hire by the company I was working for, and became my helper. We got along famously. Even though he was 10 years older than me, he didn't mind working under a 23-year-old carpenter as an apprentice. Chad and I had worked together for 6 months when he brought up the idea of starting a business together. He figured between the two of us, we could easily run a crew and build houses. After talking it over with my pregnant partner, we decided that it would be better for me to be an employee, but still a 50% partner for tax reasons and insurance purposes. Chad said that was fine with him. So we started laying out who would take care of certain aspects of the business. Chad was to be the guy to find work, as I look way younger than I am, and it doesn't instill a lot of confidence in the client to think their framer is 16. Chad was also to take care of payroll, insurance, and any other financial factions. My duties were simple: staff and run the crew and keep on budget, something that came easy to me. I was to be paid an hourly wage, as well as 50% of profit after all business expenses. I never took my profit draw as I rolled it back into growing the company. Things were great for about 6 months. The crew was working well together, we had a few houses under our belts, and a contract for a 10,000 square foot custom house with multiple outbuildings. Things were great, so Chad has never built a foundation, and we usually hired a crew to put the foundation in for us, as like I said, Chad has never built one, and I personally hate concrete work. We couldn't get our normal foundation crew in, so I stepped up and said screw it. I'll do it myself. The company we were building for is one of the best custom home builders around, and doing a good job on this house could mean that we wouldn't have to pound the pavement looking for work. Work would be given to us. Perfect arrangement, until it wasn't. Chad started spending money like it was going out of style. He sold his 2500 Chevy pickup and bought a new Jeep Wrangler. He had the Jeep for about a month before he sank it in water while 4x4ing, and it caught on fire mysteriously a few days after. He received the insurance payout and bought a brand new Dodge 2500 Power Wagon, which he, in short order, sunk in water within a few weeks. I never noticed the red flags, as Chad and I rarely spoke face to face. He was the business side. I was the get stuff done side. I finished the foundation and picked up the check from the builder. The builder said that we overbilled him by 25%, but he was happy with the work I done, but not to overbill again, as he doesn't like overpaying, as there may not be any money left at the end of the build. I apologized and asked him to cancel the check and issue one for the work actually completed. He agreed too and said, "I'm so happy to have honest people working for me. I usually don't pick up the checks, nor did I ever really look at the books, as it wasn't in the scope of my responsibilities." This prompted me to log onto our corporate account and see that we are so far in the red that we couldn't afford to buy a red pen, let alone cover payroll. I showed up at Chad's house and tore a strip off of him. He apologized and promised to top up the account with his personal profit draw money. I went into work Monday to find the locks on our tool bin had been changed, my name removed from all accounts, and a letter taped to the tool bin stating I was dismissed from my duties for an undisclosed reason. I was furious. I was not aware that as a business partner I could be fired. I found another job quite quickly and tried my best to put it behind me. That's when I found out where the money was going, and that Chad had been slandering my name around town, blaming me for the missing money, as well as a bunch of egregious statements about my work ethic, trade skills, mental stability, and home life. Now that I fastidiously tracked all of our interactions with a simple journal and had backups of the transactions of our business account, I also happened to have backups of all our texts, voicemails, and pictures of everything. This is the revenge part. I took the evidence to my father's lawyer friend, who started a fraud embezzlement investigation through the CRA, Canadian Revenue Agency, Canada's IRS, and called the insurance provider to make sure they were being paid. They had never received anything. I called the builder whom we were building for and explained what was happening. He told me that Chad had essentially stolen around $30,000 for payment of work not completed, and had broken into their office and stolen another $15,000 replacement value of equipment and tools. I did what anyone would do. I called the police. Police said they couldn't help me and said it was a civil case, and the builder said he wasn't going to sue, as Chad had no money and it wasn't worth the headache. So I called his auto insurance company, sent them all the pictures of his sunk vehicles, texts about them, and a short video he sent of him lighting the Jeep on fire. Insurance company filed charges against Chad, and Chad is on the hook for around $130,000. I've spent the last 9.5 years telling anyone who will listen about Chad, and I have had him essentially blacklisted from the carpentry industry around here. I have also looked up his criminal history, as it is public domain every 3 months or so, and make a point of showing up at his court proceedings, or offering myself as a character reference for the Crown prosecution. So I've gone out of my way to remind Chad that he can't screw me over without repercussions. And no, this doesn't end here. Years have passed, and I am still mad. I received a call from a guy offering me a job. It was the builder that Chad screwed over, not remembering that we know each other. After I explained who I was, and this bridge is burnt due to Chad, he still offers me the job. Medical, dental, company van, gas card, corporate credit card. I accepted his offer. First order of business. Finds another way to screw with Chad. Through the grapevine, I find where he's living and working. New boss calls the company Chad is working for, and we found out that he is summarily fired. I get in touch with his landlord, explain how he operates, and Chad is evicted for unpaid rent. He was apparently a couple months behind. I also managed to get his girlfriend's phone number, call her, and explain what this guy does to people, and his extensive criminal history, including, but not limited to fraud, identity theft, insurance fraud, his many assaults, and his wanted picture published in the paper. Turns out she is the owner of his truck, primary operator, but he pays the insurance. He cannot insure a vehicle until he pays off what he owes for the fraud. She asks me what she should do. I say that I'll take care of it. I call the insurance provider, explain what is going on, for them to tell me he doesn't even have a license anymore. They void the insurance on his girlfriend's truck after speaking to her, and set up a sting with the police. I personally got to be involved as I knew what was going on, so I sit and wait for the day it goes down. I roll up behind the unmarked police cruiser and quickly explain who I am and what my plans are. The police are thinking that they are just waiting to pull him over for driving without a license and no insurance. I said I'm going to call him immediately as soon as I see him. So he comes cruising out, and I make the call. He actually picked up the phone to call me a bunch of names, and the N-word. I am as white as the fresh fallen snow and promptly gets pulled over. Police issue a ticket for reckless driving, no seatbelt, no license, and using a handheld device. During this, the girlfriend pulls up and proceeds to give consent to search her truck. In the truck, they find multiple stolen credit cards, a couple ATM skimmer machines, and a fake police badge. He was arrested on the spot. Revenge over, right? Nope. Police then asked to search the residence he was living at. He moved into the girlfriend's house after I had him evicted from his own place. In the garage, they find a vast collection of stolen tools, a lot of which belonged to the builder I was working for, from when he broke into their office, and they were all stupidly still labeled with the company's inventory control stickers. This brought on more charges, and he was remanded to police custody until his trial date. Well, justice is sometimes slow here in Canada, and his trial date was at the time 17 months into the future. Well, yesterday was his trial date, so my boss, who Chad ripped off, Chad's ex-girlfriend, and I attended the hearing, just to see the man squirm. His judgment was 8 years in jail, after being granted time and a half for time served, a $100,000 fine, 1,000-hour community service after release, and no possibility of parole. I got to watch him be taken away in chains twice. Never underestimate the fury of a quiet man, and screw Chad. Enjoying the stories yet? If you do, please subscribe, like, and comment. This incident happened a few weeks ago, and I was really hesitant to share it here. Hoping that Karen doesn't recognize herself, here it is. I, a 23-year-old non-binary person, was browsing in a shopping center with my autism service dog Knox, a 1-year-old female, as part of her training. I was picking out clothes and trying them on, hoping that by the end of the training, I'd find something that suits my style. As I was entering another alternative clothing store, Karen tapped me on the shoulder. Karen, you know that dogs aren't allowed in these stores, right? Me, visibly confused. I'm sorry, Karen. Are you deaf? I said that you need to leave. I pointed to Knox's vest, showing the label and the program name that certified her. Ma'am, this is a service dog. Karen cut me off. You are clearly not disabled. You're not autistic. You can talk. Now leave the store before I call security and get you banned. Barely holding back my tears, excuse me, please, Karen. No, I'm going to walk you to the exit to make sure that you and your dog are leaving. At this moment, Knox alerted. I needed to sit down, but I couldn't. Everything was so loud, and it seemed the lights were getting even brighter. I started crying, and Knox moved between my legs for comfort. Me, sobbing and repeating, "Go away," Karen, talking over me. "Oh, grow up, my child, autistic nonverbal scam dog. Trained more." Her speech became more and more muffled as I got even more overwhelmed. I attempted to sit on the ground, but Karen grabbed my arm. Me, do not touch me. If we didn't have a crowd before, we definitely did now. A security guard appeared. I calmed down a bit, enough to understand speech. Security guard, what's happening, Karen? This person over here is faking. They have scammed a program to give them a service dog for their autism. My child will benefit from that dog more, as they really have autism, and don't speak. I need that dog. As she was speaking, I felt a tug on Knox's leash and I unclipped it from her collar. Now I was holding Knox by her harness, as she sat right in front of me, giving me gentle snuggles and kisses. Karen, how dare you? Security guard, do something. Security guard turned to me. Is that dog a service dog? Me, still crying. Yes? Karen, they do not need it. Security guard. Shush. Do you have an ID for the dog, and can I have yours? Me. Yes, I gave the security guard the needed documents. They checked them and gave them back. I'm not from the US or the UK. There's no such thing as owner-trained service dogs. Service dogs are trained by professional trainers and are free. There are requirements that need to be met, such as diagnosis and/or an interview with a medical team lead or therapist. Security guard, your documents are in order. You may go. Karen, no, that's not fair. My kid needs that dog more than this adult. Security guard. Ma'am, I will ask you to return the leash to this person and continue your day. Karen, no, this is for my service dog that they're now holding. Security guard. Ma'am, that's theft. If you don't return the leash now, I'm afraid I'll have to call the police. Karen handed the leash to the security guard, who gave it back to me. I was escorted to the restroom by the security guard to make sure Karen didn't continue to harass me. I washed my face and went to the nearest bench to sit and calm down a bit more. Then I left. Edit. Karen did not call her child an it. I do not remember the child's gender. Update. I was not expecting this to get that much attention. Thank you for the awards and the kind words. I spoke with a lawyer, as many of you suggested. I can't press charges because technically, she didn't break any law. In the country I live in, there's no such thing as emotional or mental damage charges, and there was something about the physical touch that I didn't understand, but it's not illegal. As for taking my leash, if she hadn't returned it, it would have been considered theft. The laws surrounding service dogs are not understandable to me. This happened a few years ago when I was trying to get back into reading. High school and college kind of destroyed my love for the hobby by forcing me to read the classics. Some of them were good, but a lot of them were outdated and boring. As a person with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, forcing me to read a 500-page book that I hated was agonizing. However, I've been an avid player of Dungeons & Dragons for a while, so I decided to try and rekindle the hobby by buying some fantasy books. I did some research before I went out to the store and had a short list of what I wanted to buy. Off to Barnes & Noble I went. Barnes & Noble, as I've learned, tends to lump science fiction and fantasy together in the same section. But since I knew exactly what I was looking for, it didn't bother me much. I entered the aisle and saw a frustrated-looking woman with 2 books in her hands, looking between them. She wasn't reading them, just staring perplexed at the covers. From a quick glance, she seemed to be about in her 70s with short gray hair, though the scowling pout on her face made her look like a petulant child. I must have seemed like I knew what I was doing. After all, I had come in already knowing what I wanted. It took about 30 seconds for me to quickly pick out the 3 books I wanted to try. But obviously, that was not quick enough to avoid being flagged down. "Excuse me, young man," the woman called after me, right before I was about to step out of the aisle. So close to avoiding this interaction. I work in customer service though, so reflexively, I turned on the smile. "Yes, ma'am. Can't a woman get some help over here?" There was a slight pause, and I was about to tell her that I would send an employee right over, but she continued talking. "I need some help picking out a gift for my grandson." I deflated a little bit, as I don't much like interacting with strangers, but this woman hadn't done anything rude yet, so I decided to try and be nice. "Well, what kind of book is he looking for?" "My grandson likes fantasy," she said. I took a look at the books in her hands, both of which were very clearly not fantasy, as they both had spaceships on the front. For now, I kept the condescending tone out of my voice. I'm sorry, but both of those are science fiction books. Well, how was I possibly supposed to know that? She exclaimed. Well, anything with a spaceship or any kind of technology on the cover is a dead giveaway for starters. My grandson says that science fiction is silly. I won't risk giving him some silly story. You need to give me a fantasy book for my grandson. Look, ma'am, I don't work here. If you want a recommendation, I can. Oh, that's nonsense, you've been helping me already. And now you're just trying to be lazy. I began losing my patience. I deal with these types of people at my place of work, and I refuse to be nice to them outside of work. Well, here's an idea for you. How about you read the back of the book, you know, the little section that says what the book is about, instead of just staring at the covers. How dare you talk back to me? It's not my job to know what the books are about. It's yours. Oh yeah, it must be such a strain to read 5 sentences. You definitely need to have people do that for you. Or why not just Google popular fantasy books? You have a phone, don't you? At this point, the woman was red in the face. I'm not going to spend my time reading this nothing genre. I only waste my time on books of substance. I just want a gift for my grandson. Like I said, Google fantasy books and pick a random title if you're so averse to reading. What does averse mean? Use words that people can understand. I looked at her with a raised eyebrow for a moment or two, and then just turned around. Bye, ma'am. She grabbed my arm, and at this point I was very careful. I'm a 6'5" man, and this is a tiny old woman. If I reacted to her grabbing me even reflexively, it could be very bad. You're not going anywhere. Where is your manager? I began to say, but stopped as I had an idea. With as tall as I am, I could easily see over the aisles and find the corner of the store that is furthest away from the cash registers. Hiding my smirk, I said, "Oh, he's over in the biographies section. It's over there." I pointed with my free arm to the back corner of the store. She tugged on my arm and said, "You're coming with me." But given my height and weight, I just stayed firmly planted and watched this small woman try to drag me away. After about a minute, she huffed, face nearly purple with rage now, as she said, "You wait here," and stormed off to the back of the store. I did no such thing. Rather, I went and bought my books at the cash register. Just as the cashier was handing me my bag and receipt, I heard, "There he is." I frowned at that, and turned to see that she had actually found the manager, who was looking confused. "That's the employee who shoved me." Having already received my books and knowing that no one there could do anything to actually stop me, I walked out of the store as the woman tried to convince the manager that I was just so horrible to her. The manager nodded at me to leave. I got in my car and left, not ever knowing how that turned out. I was never contacted by police, nor was I banned from the store, so clearly her claim didn't stick. I still visit this store regularly today, and I have never seen this woman again. To start this off, I came back after all this time to find 500 messages in my inbox and 130 unanswered private messages. Please don't private message me anymore. There are just too many to answer. So if you private messaged me and I clicked ignore, I'm sorry. Just know that's why. It was not personal. I just felt too overwhelmed to reply to so many. But that's not what brought me back to Reddit. I'd decided to stay away for at least a year because my posts were not exactly boosting family morale. So I didn't log in for quite some time. But then the other day, my brother Dan spotted a video that was unbelievably similar to mine in far too many ways. Only it was about an original poster with a twin sister instead of a sister-in-law. But it had so much of the same, entitled Narcissistic Parents, a guy treated poorly all his life and then rendered homeless, a golden child sibling, keeping the favoritism a closely guarded secret from family while the original poster was growing up, a sister still in her 20s with 3 kids and pregnant with a 4th. The sister's eldest son attacks the original poster, and above all, them trying to steal the original poster's house by breaking in while he wasn't home. So many parts were nearly identical, even 2 lines like, "Suck it up," and "My house is not up for grabs" were in the video. My parents and brother are frankly upset, And I wasn't happy seeing the video either. We've all been trying hard to get past our previous family dynamic, and what ex-sister-in-law put us all through. You can imagine it took a lot for me to let go of my grudges. But in a year, my parents and Dan have improved more than I'd seen in my entire life before that. And I love my nieces and nephews to pieces. So whoever wrote that copycat story, congratulations, you just sent my entire family right back into needing therapy. And yes, my family is aware I'm making this post. Now with that rant over, here's what I hope to be my final update. Now for what was stated in the title. I had a few naysayers before, but Dan kept his word. My camper was returned to me a few months ago, and in good condition. Dan took good care of it, and thoroughly cleaned it before giving it back. He and our father also resealed the roof on it once while it was in their care. Inside it's no worse for wear than it was when I was living in it. Only I got it back smelling like pine cleaner. There was some minor drama while Dan was living in my camper from a neighbor right behind them. Not quite sure she qualifies as a difficult person, but she was close enough. She started yelling at them from over the fence about the camper and started threatening to call the police. My brother and father went off on her, and then explained Dan was living in the camper so his son could have his bedroom. Well, the neighbor still wasn't happy but stopped with the threats. My father talked to her husband later, and he was very upset with her. Then he apologized on her behalf and said Dan was doing a good thing by giving up his room to his son. The neighbor's husband also congratulated Dan on kicking out ex-sister-in-law, and said he was always afraid to mention it before, but she was just a horrid woman. We can all agree on that now. So yeah, the neighbors aren't a problem anymore. Dan and our father managed to get some money together on the side and bought a slightly bigger camper to set up in our parents' backyard. We needed my truck just to move it, but we got it in there. It's basically the best Dan can do right now until the credit debts his ex piled up are paid off. And even then, he's got the future of his kids to plan for. He may be living in that camper for the next 10 years, but it's preferable to how it was when he was married. His ex-wife certainly can't, and won't be contributing to college funds for the kids, except maybe for her affair baby. Dan's camper is admittedly better than mine. It's newer, bigger, and has its own bathroom. Mine does not, although Dan never really uses said bathroom. It's basically become a closet since the toilet and shower are so tiny. If he needs to use the bathroom, he just goes in the house. Dan and I had a joking laugh about me being jealous. He's got the better mobile home, and we bantered like sarcastic gentlemen about it. He's kitted out his camper with some better amenities, like a flat-screen TV complete with streaming, video games, and DVD. He said it feels like he really has his own place now, even though he's just in the backyard. And he's much happier now that he's divorced. Dan tells me one day he'll get a truck too, just so he can move the camper on his own someday. But for now, he's sticking with his minivan for the sake of his kids. So his camper is sitting pretty where it is, and mine is back in my backyard where it belongs. Though it's not gone unused. I temporarily rented it to a cousin who moved into the area for work, and they were only in the camper for about a month before finding their own apartment. Other than that, it serves as a guest house when needed. Relatives come by to use it when in town so as to not need a motel. My nephew has come over to stay in it a few times for fun as well. His sisters don't really have an interest. The camper is the closest he's ever been to camping. Same here, sadly, because I didn't buy that camper to camp but to live in. As for my parents, they've gotten therapy. My mother got medicated for her mental problems, and fully acknowledges her terrible past mistakes as a parent with all of the favoritism, as does my father. My father is still awkward around me, but he's been fairly active in his church and is working hard to rebuild the family reputation as best he can. And Dan has cut back on drinking a lot, since he isn't so stressed out anymore. He's even taken up exercising. He's in pretty good shape now. And he told me his ex-wife saw the picture of him he posted online after shedding 20 pounds and called him to compliment him. He didn't take the bait. As for the holidays, my parents, brother, and nieces and nephews all came to my Christmas Eve party last year, along with most of the other relatives who came the year prior. No problems at all. save for the fact none of them could stay the night in my spare rooms anymore, since I rented them out. Both of my tenants were away seeing their own families too. Things went swimmingly. Not only was ex-sister-in-law not invited, but she also wouldn't have been able to crash the party anyway because of my restraining order against her. But she also barely made any attempt to spend time with her other kids either. She only bothered to see them twice a month at best. She didn't even send them any gifts for Christmas or birthdays since being outed as a cheater. And the kids were initially pretty upset about that, but now they just don't care. Ex-sister-in-law, I guess, decided she was gonna try to live like she was single again, despite having a baby at home. And it didn't go well because life gave her one heck of a cheese slap. On New Year's, ex-sister-in-law went out late to party, like it was 1999, and got pulled over by a cop on her way home. She got arrested for driving under the influence, and her car was impounded. She called Dan while being arrested, begging him to come get her car to keep it from going to impound. He told her he was not helping her, and she could deal with it herself. Dan has drunk and drove, so it was a little hypocritical. But this woman put him through so much, I don't blame him for rebuffing her. Some flying monkey of ex-sister-in-laws called Dan to berate him about being a terrible person. Pretty sure this was the same woman who called me a while back. Dan had none of her nonsense and went off on her with a long tirade about his ex's cheating, what happened in the divorce, and that he has no sympathy for his ex, since she left him with mounds of credit card debt and she does nothing for their kids anymore. The flying monkey didn't call back. We still don't know who she was, but Dan said she sounded like a religious fanatic. Ex-sister-in-law went to court, and she pleaded guilty to the driving under the influence charge. Dan found this out because she called him, claiming that because of the driving under the influence, she wouldn't be seeing her other kids anytime soon. She told him she was sentenced to take a 6-month driving under the influence class, during which her license is suspended until completion. And she won't be allowed to drink at all, which is the part she was most upset about. I've heard of these classes before. They make you take regular and at times random urine tests, and when you finally get your license back, you have to have a camera and breathalyzer installed in your car for a year. Also, increased insurance rates for the driving under the influence charge on record. Ex-sister-in-law has not been having a fun time, but I have no pity for her. I don't drink and drive. Sadly, that's all the information I have on ex-sister-in-law, as she's kept minimal contact with Dan for some time now, and eventually she'll probably stop contacting him altogether, unless absolutely necessary. I don't know anything else about sister-in-law's parents or her affair baby, even Dan doesn't know. But I do still have a bit of information on someone else. Remember ex-sister-in-law's affair partner, the Bronze T. Thanks for joining us. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe for more captivating stories. Share your own experiences and opinions in the comments below, and let's keep the conversation going. Until next time, stay tuned for more epic tales.